All right, everybody, welcome back for part 2 of our retrospective, or I guess our overview of DEVS, the FX television event, I think they called it, or whatever, the Alex Garland 8-part series that Dr. Douglas Bielmeier and I are... Wait, I mispronounced that. Wait. That Dr. Doug Bielmeier and I are painstakingly going through 2 episodes per part. And joining me, as I've said now twice, one correctly and one incorrectly time, is Dr. Doug Bielmeier, the teaching professor at Northeastern University, whose most recent album that you can buy is Music for Billionaires, and whose upcoming album, fall of this year, is Electric Rodeo Revival, and he is also the host of the podcast The Process, which is in season 6. Doug, welcome back. I couldn't get your name right, but I got all the other stuff right, so...
Well, if you 50, don't get 50. It right, as long as you say it 3 times, then that's great. It's like Candyman, basically.
That's like the what do you call it? The Beetlejuice thing, right? Just keep saying it, and eventually something
times.
will happen. Good, bad, something will happen.
Bad,
so,
yes.
Welcome back. We are talking tonight about DEVS episode 3 and 4. These don't have titles. I actually double-checked, and there are no titles for any of these, which I think is interesting. I don't mind that.
And the first 2 did. The first 2 did, you're saying?
No, none of them. None of these episodes. They're just literally episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They don't have titles. Okay. So it's interesting. I don't mind that, but I'm so used to episodes of anything having titles that I sort of like that it's just like, no, you decide what the most important part of the episode is. We're not going to tell you, but it makes it tough to say episode 3, number 3. But we're talking about number 3 and number 4. So your thoughts on now what is getting towards the middle chunk of the show?
Once again, this is a show I would recommend watching twice. Because the first time I watched it, and I've mentioned this many times, the first time I watched this show, I had no idea what was going on, and not in a way, like I kind of understood there's a supercomputer and things are happening, but I had all these expectations about what it was actually about. I thought it was more about like time travel, or I had like different science fiction tropes in mind. So rewatching it a second time, I've really begun to appreciate how clear they've actually been with us, and how there's these really important scenes where Alex Garland and the characters, their dialogue and the script is telling us exactly what's happening. So I think like the first time I watched it, I was kind of like trying to push the show in a different direction. And we talked about this last time. You said too, like after watching episode 2, you were kind of like, oh, is this going to be like an espionage thing? Like, is that where they're going with this? And you kind of, weren't so enthused about that, if that's the way they were going. And I think I was like, oh, this is about time travel. This whole thing is about time travel. And it is and it isn't. It's its own thing. So it's really great to rewatch it and just really realize how many clues I had been getting all the way that I was kind of resisting. And also just going back to what a great writer Alex Garland is. Because literally, there's no wasted scenes. Even the scenes where I'll comment once again about things where we're like backtracking and we're waiting for characters to figure things out we already know, those scenes hold a very important place, and the things that are said in those scenes, like we've mentioned before, are so layered. So yeah, my impression is, still going through this is a show, like if you're watching it for the first time and you're watching these episodes afterwards, which I think is a great thing to do, you're probably going to need to watch it a second time, especially when we get to the end and we're like, hey, we think it's about this. And you'll be like, what? Because that's how I was. By the end, I was like, all right, well, I had a good time, but I'm not sure what happened. But of course, maybe you were more in connection with it, or understanding what's going on.
No,
what have you thought so far?
I think you're right. The repeated viewing, one of the things I'm really noticing is how, like you said, well written this is, where things that there's a lot of double meanings to what people say, things that work perfectly well within the scene, but then later you realize, oh, wow, they're actually talking about this. This has like a secondary meaning. There's so much of that. And it's such a delicate balance, because a lot of shows try to do that, and they do it very clumsily. They don't do it with the kind of finesse that you need to do it, where it feels natural. It oftentimes will seem like the person is winking to the camera and saying, but what shall come next? And you're like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to pay attention. Where in here, a lot of it is very natural in how people might be talking to each other. And so there's going to be a clip I'll play at one point where Forrest will say something to Kenton, and I'll specifically talk about it after I play the clip, that when the first time you watch it, it has one meaning. The second time you watch it, it has such a vastly different meaning. It still works within the context of the scene. So even if you only did the surface read, it doesn't feel clunky or out of place. But then once you know what the ending is and where it's going, it's such a specific word choice and the way it's delivered and what is being said. And that is the thing on the second watch, that now being freed up of the mystery, which still works as just this kind of, now the pieces are being put in place. It's more of just watching the painting being painted, as opposed to having somebody where you can only see their back and you just see the brush and you don't really know, oh, there's a little bit of red there and there's a cloud there, but what is the actual scene? Now knowing what the landscape is, because you've watched it once, now you see, oh, the paint strokes, this is where they were painting things, this is how it was being laid out. And that's what I think I'm really delighting in, is appreciating how the pieces in the table was being set. And also, I've been really paying attention to how the scenes have been flowing, because I wanted to see on a second watch, do I feel like it's dragging? Does the pace seem off? Does it seem like I'm noticing the time? And so far, halfway through now, because just jumping to the end, I don't feel like this show has dragged at all. In fact, if anything, I keep being astonished by, because I know how some of the cliffhangers ahead of time, so I'm like, we're already here? This has already been 40-something minutes? It feels like even the slow talky scenes, because they're so beautifully shot, because they're so intentional, because there's, especially this one, there's such interesting color usage right off the bat. The sound and color, again, are just assaulting you with stuff that makes you just immediately, again, kind of on the back foot. What is happening? What is this? Why am I seeing this? Because the first episode in this one, I think the second one too, they start with just almost these visual audio assaults on you, where you're just put back, because they always end very quietly. And so even binge watching it as we are, watching it rapid fire, it still works. But imagine it's been a week since the last episode. You're sitting there going, what is going to happen? And it's just like, bang, and it just throws it at you. And I just think
and I
so
wonder
far,
if that was part of it too. Like we were talking offline about, this was a weekly series, so they kind of got to get you back up to it. Sometimes now, like a Netflix series or something where they know you're just going to like binge watch it in an afternoon or like over a weekend, the episodes will just kind of like slide right into the next without too much pomp and circumstance. But yeah, the cold opens are like really important in this series, because they want to kind of just like, boom, push you right back into the kind of the tension that left off from the week before.
And I think they work. I think it works either way, because there are people who will rewatch and they will put the space back in. They'll watch an episode and wait a week. I think that would still work. And I think watching it this way, none of the power is lost. I think there is such, again, I think that the idea was that Garland knew that people were, especially in 2020, when this was on, that was at one of the heights of binge watching. So I'm sure there was this idea that this has to be architected to work with space and without. So it has this ebb and flow. And that's why I think that often at least so far, the end credits are very still and quiet. It's like the release before then the assault comes back. So it allows for either you to space these out, which you absolutely could. I don't think some shows work better spaced out, but don't work better tight, and some work the opposite way. I think the show works either way. So if you want to space them out, you absolutely can. But it is really, so much of the rewatch has been appreciating the craft of how this is assembled and just thinking, wow, it's so rare. And I've said this during this already in the last episode. It's so rare to see an artisan who gets to do something the way they clearly have it envisioned to do. So when you watch this, that's, again, it comes back to like Lynch and season 3 of Twin Peaks, where I'm like, man, because now, of course, it is the last major project he did. What a last project. So if Garland were to never do anything after this, you'd still be like, man, you got to do this. Obviously he is. He did Civil War, and he's, I'm sure, going to do more. But it's like, wow, this is one of those showpieces where you're like, they gave you everything and you didn't go too far into excess, which is so common as well, where somebody obviously was, saying, okay, let's tweak and cut and edit correctly here and there. But still, it's such a wonderful vision. And I'm just so happy to be re-experiencing it. And it's working. It's still holding up. And that's the best part of it so far.
Yeah, and absolutely agree, like the way the cuts and, these cold opens, speaking about these, are these like kind of ruptures back into the episode. I've noticed so far now. So episode 1 was like we talked about, it was a world building thing, like kind of an assault. You had that really wonderful sound design. The score, obviously, by Ben Salisbury and Jeff Barrow, as well as I guess the Insects too have a few tracks on there as well. But the sound design, I went and I did some more research, and it was Glenn Fremantle and Ben Barker who did the sound design. So we were searching the last time for some of that like first episode cold open where it was just like the Gregorian chant and then the like hyper saxophone or whatever. And so I think a lot of those scenes where we're hearing things that are kind of on the soundtrack, but never quite that way, these are all great things that the sound designers sort of did, after the fact. So I think that's probably under the direction of Garland, where he's like, I really want these opens to kind of be an assault. But one thing real quick about them is I noticed the first episode was here's the world, and it was very visceral and very loud. The second one had I'm forgetting the name of the group already, but it had the supervised sound or the song that, was a release from an album. And that was like a recap. It was like recapping things that were going to happen in the episode, or like foreshadowing, I guess, not recapping, like foreshadowing what was going to happen. And we weren't quite sure yet. Remember, we saw two men like in a scuffle and we weren't sure who that was. Now, in the third episode, it was visceral, here's the world again. And it was just, the music was an assault. And, we get to see the machine kind of doing its bad algorithm, right? And we get to see, like, this is why this show is amazing, man. In the start of the third episode, we get to see something that's really unclear, unfuzzy. We see somebody doing a cave painting. We see what we think is the crucifixion of Christ. We see an army, I think. I see like an army marching. And then I think I see Joan of Arc being burnt I see a woman being burnt at the stake. And then I see Lily. And it's a Lily that had already happened. I think it's when Lily put the picture in the window and said, fuck off to the Russian agent. So that one was here's a visceral thing. And then the fourth episode, which we'll talk about next, that had more of the recap like the second one did, or the forecap, I guess you could say, like on a very special episode of DEVS tonight, you'll see these actors or whatever. So I thought
previously on DEVS,
right,
your ears are going to get blown out.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, but instead of previously, it's like the prediction says, right? Like this is what'll happen. So I think that's interesting. You're absolutely right. They really treat those cold opens in a very special way to kind of either tell us what's going to kind of foreshadow what's going to happen, or to get us back into that world.
Yeah, like you said, this opening, I was paying attention because I kind of went back and rewatched it after I finished the two episodes, and I rewatched it. So like you said, we get all these images. Yeah, that's definitely supposed to be Joan of Arc. But also the sound is it's so harsh, and it's so alternating between, it's kind of like glitching out. It's at times very, very shrill, and it's supposed to be, again, off-putting. We see Lily, we see Amaya again. We see what look like the pyramids. There's some imagery that I don't even know what it was supposed to be.
I didn't even see the pyramids.
All this stuff.
There was pyramids. I didn't even see that because it was so blurry, and it was wonderful.
It looks like I think they're supposed to be Mayan pyramids, not the Egyptian pyramids, because they have like the level tops.
Yeah.
But again, this is supposed to be that we're seeing history, and it ends up, as you said, with Lily putting the sign in the window. So this is clearly supposed to be showing us things that came before, which lines up with the idea of, this is supposed to be being able to see into the past for some reason. And then it goes right from that into two of the technicians, Lyndon and Stuart. Stuart watching Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller having sex. And
so specific, not just any sex, but it had to be Marilyn Monroe and her husband of the time.
Yeah. Yep. And Katie comes in and is rightfully disgusted because she says one of the rules is we don't invade privacy, which I don't know in a machine like this how that's even possible. I mean, Jesus being crucified, I guess it was a public event, but boy, it's sure personal, but whatever.
Yeah. Allegedly, it was a public event. So,
but she comes in and basically says, "Oh, you're breaking one of the rules, turn it off." And they have this kind of reaction like, "So what?" And it is it feels like a very kind of, yeah, this is what tech bros do type of thing. And of course, the adult has to come into the room and say, stop watching porn on your on
Stop
our
turning it into
dime.
porn. Like, stop turning the new technology into porn.
Yeah, why do you always have to resort to it being pornography?
Right.
Right?
Well, even the cave paintings, right? Even the cave paintings that we see at the start of the episode, like those devolve into, imagery.
Yeah, I mean, everything eventually will devolve into sex one way or another. I mean, it's not that it's untrue, but it is just kind of the cliche being played out that, of course, these two aren't looking at, I don't know, Jonah Salk fixing the famine crisis or anything like that. No, they're watching Marilyn Monroe get down with a nerdy writer. Great, fantastic. What a wonderful use of our multi-billion-dollar quantum machine is to watch two people boning in granular quality. It looks like it's dial-up from the AOL days. Fantastic.
But here's the thing. One thing that it did dawn on me, there's a lot of like other like kind of important things that are happening. But one thing that dawned on me is, we get the rules, right? And one of the rules, that Katie states is don't, invade somebody's privacy. And then the second rule she does mention is don't look forward. So we get our Asimovian rules, right? Like that there's like rules to the machine. Whatever it does, we're not quite sure yet, but whatever it does, you can't look forward and don't invade people's privacy. And here's the thing, you said it already. The Joan of Arc burning, that was a public event, I assume, right? And the crucifixion of Christ was a public event. So these were events where there were actual physical witnesses. I don't think there was a witness when Marilyn Monroe was having consensual sex with her husband, right? And
I mean, for all we know, they never did because it seemed like an odd marriage at the time. Everybody was like the writer and her. So for all we know,
but probably there was no one else in the room, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that's an important point that it didn't hit me. This didn't hit me till actually like weeks after watching the show. But there are moments where people are watching this machine show us events or show us things that there wasn't another human to actually witness. So that's just something that like I kind of had this like aha moment rewatching it again. I was like, oh, there's times when we'll have characters watching, these very public, very well-known moments in history, and then also these kind of more intimate moments. So I don't know if that's what she was implying by too, like don't invade the privacy. So we're not really interested in predicting, things that really we can't verify. Like they mentioned don't they mention the Kennedy assassination?
Yeah,
she's like
Oswald did
go
it.
rewatch.
Like, Oswald did it.
She's like go rewatch the Kennedy assassination, and they're like, yeah, we already did. Oswald did it, and that would have been a public thing that they could quote unquote verify, right? So, but that was great. Right at the start of this episode, we get the crazy machine, all the things it can do, and then we get our rules.
Well, and what it does is it starts you thinking, well, why wouldn't they want to go forward? I mean, you sit there and go, why would that be a rule? And we'll find out why later. At least I have my theory on why based on what happens later. It doesn't mean
they don't want to go forward. It's just
well, and also
they made
as soon
rule.
as she leaves the room, Stewart immediately says, like, we don't know that they break the rules. I mean, and obviously that's an open secret. Forrest admits it later too, that he knows that they know that they break the rules. But the invasion of privacy, I think part of that is because if they can look at anybody, can't they look at Katie and Forrest, and can't they start to see what the nature of what they're doing? Because, or whether the project is even a success. They could even see, like, if Lyndon were to look forward, let's say, to get to jump a little bit ahead, then Lyndon might see what was coming in the future, even within the next episode. And so there's obviously a reason that you assume that Katie and Forrest both use it to look into the future to make sure the tram lines are intact, because that's what they do a couple of times.
Well, it's a control rule. It's a control rule, right? It's like It's not like don't cross the streams, right? Like if you cross the streams, they said there'd be like an intergalactic like meltdown or something in Ghostbusters, right? Which is a very scientific movie, right? But like this isn't like that. They just made these rules up, and even the Asimov rules, right, about the robots and all that, like what they can do. It's supposed to like protect people, right, from robots. So. Yeah, I just like that now we're starting to get, this is a machine now and there's rules. And like you said, it's clear that Katie and other people are not following them.
Well, I think it may actually be closer to the don't cross the streams rule than it seems in this episode. We'll get to that when we get to episode 4. But I actually think there is a reason given where it's like, no, that is like crossing the streams. But within the confines of this episode, the next thing we see then is, unsurprisingly, and I'm kind of glad they acknowledged it right away, government oversight. A senator shows up and says, what are you doing with this super machine? Because she comes in and she starts listing off all these different tech companies and the negative effects they've had, or the perceived negative effects they've had on society. And she's like, yeah, you basically have a super company and this machine that, at least from what little we know of it, it is a massively powerful machine and we need to know what's going on. And they kind of have this back and forth for a bit. And then Forrest finally admits that it's a prediction machine. And she says, okay, predict what? And he says, well, really anything. And she says, like the weather? He says, sure, we can predict the weather. And she's like, okay, I can cover you on that. So we can work together. So man, immediately ulterior motive right there. Because the senator's sitting there going, can it project whether I'm going to win my re-election bid? Because that would be good to know.
Oh, you could see the wheels turning. Yeah. I love her line though, too, about, they use you, they need you. When she's talking about like the American people's relationship to tech companies, they use you, they need you. Like she implies that we're like addicted to social media. But she says they don't like you anymore. So there was a point, Alex Garland's Ex Machina in 2015, the kind of evil CEO in that talks about how he used something like Facebook to train the robots in that movie. So even back then, like that's actually when a lot of that data mining started happening, or the big data really started to become sort of a public thing. So I think in 2020, when this was made, I think that was very of the time and very appropriate now too, is that people are like using this stuff. They're almost kind of addicted to it in a way, but that they're not really happy with these companies and these CEOs. So she was kind of using that also as a way to be like, dude, you got to give me something to keep these people, to keep these people at bay. And when he told her it was a prediction machine, I was still going off the old theory that this is like a time machine. So I thought he just like told her that. Like I thought he was just kind of lying. And then I love the thing about, is it going to rain today? And she's like, can it predict the weather? And she's like, is it going to rain today? And he just kind of looks at the sky and he goes, looks like it might. So, just like, it's kind of, so there was a lot of kind of finagling there, but yeah, it was clear that she didn't want to protect the American people. It's that she just wanted to be in control of it.
Well, and in a sense, a prediction machine would be a time machine. You are not literally traveling forward, but you are seeing events. So you are in effect able to, in theory, now this is the interesting part, is he doesn't tell her about what he believes in as far as determinism. So he doesn't give any of that away. But a normal person who didn't even know about that theory, and probably most people don't, or don't know it in depth, would think, oh, that means I can see what's going to happen in the future and I can affect it. Of course, he wouldn't agree with that. That isn't his idea of how it works. And so they are still hiding things from each other because, of course, she's not doing this out of pure benevolence. She may be serving two masters where maybe she does have some concern for her constituents, but also I'm sure can see an upside for herself. But it basically plants the seed of, okay, the government and even the local government, but this is, of course, federal, they're not aware of what this company is. Like, because you sit there and go, a company, this seems like an Apple level company. So with a giant weird building in the middle of a giant forest that they seem to own, with a giant weird statue that looks like it's going to start walking around like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and stomping on churches. So it's like, okay, what are these people doing? Do we really want them to have complete control? So they do kind of seed that really quickly here where they're saying, yeah, they're not just operating in a vacuum. And then from there, we now jump into really what the majority of the episode is about, which is Lily and her trying to get people to listen to her about what's going on, that she doesn't believe that Sergei was killed. And so we have a long amount of time, which again does fly by for what's really a lot of talking scenes, where she's basically talking. She's talking to one of her colleagues. They're like, why are you back to work? And she's like, well, it's better for me, which is common. People who've suffered a trauma will come back and say it's better to work than just sit home and do nothing.
Bury myself in my work. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she comes in and she says to one of her, the colleagues there, can I talk to you? I have something I need to talk to you about. And she says, sure. And they go out and she's like, yeah, I think there's international forces that have had Sergei murdered. And in the course of this, one of her other workmates who we saw earlier in the episode, who I can't remember her name. I want to say it's Ava. What's her name?
Jen.
Okay. So Jen, who we'd seen earlier, comes over and she seems kind of suspicious, but she's, like, what are you guys talking about? And they're going over this, and the I'll call her Karen because she's blonde and a white woman. I don't know what her name was.
She had supervisor vibes. She's like definitely the middle manager.
Management woman. Management woman is like, oh, okay. She's kind of listening and saying, okay, so spies, got it.
But then you can tell she's being like, do I have to talk to HR about this? Like, you can see the wheels turning.
No, that's absolutely the thing is I have to note specific terms here because when I recount this, I have to make sure I say this stuff so they understand the severity of what's happening here. And then Jen seems to be kind of feeding into it. And at which point management lady...
Did you, by the way, watching this, did you get vibes that maybe Jen was in on the whole forest situation?
Oh, no. This is the brilliance of this episode is Jen is absolutely saying, because they go aside and management says to her, why are you encouraging this? This is nuts what she's saying. And Jen says, hey, she's had some stuff before. And you know what? If we handle this wrong, then she could blow up. So we have to just go along with this. Let's get her in front of somebody who can help her. But if you try to talk her out of it, we don't know how she'll react. And it makes a lot of sense. If somebody has psychological issues, you have to, you can't just tell them you're being crazy because that will make them reject what you're saying and you don't know what the reaction will be. So it makes complete sense. There's a very, very specific logic to it. And so Jen's like, all right, well, why don't we go tell Kent? Let's go there. Let's tell him what's going on and let them in on it. And so they have this scene where they go up to Kenton's office, and Kenton, who never doesn't just look tired and miserable. And
he looks like he's ready to snap somebody. It looks like he's ready to just snap somebody's neck. Like he could just like put somebody's lights out like in a second. And he just,
Well, it's easy to forget that he got stabbed in the abdomen in the last episode, and he's now back to work.
Right.
Because I forgot all about it until something happens way later, and you see him lift his shirt up, and you see all the blood.
I was wondering about that. That's right. I totally forgot about that.
That's the stab wound.
That's right.
I mean, you don't see any
think about
aftermath
that. You get
of that.
stabbed and you still come to work. I mean, that's a great work.
Well, I mean, in his position, he is basically forced enforcer, so he kind of has to be there. But yeah, he got stabbed by an international operative, and I'm sure the guy and the knife was probably not one of the nice knives that's a clean thing. It's probably meant. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was covered in like bird shit to give you an infection or whatever, because that's how these people operate.
Oh, like on purpose? Yeah,
to give you sepsis. Sure. So they're in the office, and he's just listening. And Lily's going on, and she's starting to sound more and more nuts about how something happened in Brooklyn.
Right. And now she's really similar. Like, she seems to be like overacting at this point, and it just seems like this really big blow up, which is a tough
she's
scene.
Talking about numbers and patterns and tattoos. And the thing is that Kenton, of course, knows that, we've seen this thing with her in numbers before. So the show has kind of demonstrated that she has this kind of relationship with numbers. And you see Jen is just kind of like trying to agree, but is also kind of looking at Kenton like, and she's going on and on and on. And there's a point where she says, don't tell me nobody believes me. And she seems to flip out and she runs out of the office. And then the next thing we see is she's climbing out on a ledge, and she's up, right, of course, conveniently as Forrest and the senator come around. And Forrest is like, get out there. She's on the ledge, man. And the senator's here. And Kenton's like, God damn it. And just runs out and has to go on the ledge and is basically trying to talk her down. And this is where this is such a good setup, because I forgot some of these details because it's the middle of the show. But then we find out, because Jen, like you said, seems like she is totally on the side of the company and she's actually working against her. And then we get the complete 360, because now we see inside the office, and there's mirrored windows because they covered it up so Kenton couldn't just be like, what are you doing? Now, there's mirrored windows, but she's basically copying video off of Kenton's computer. So she's actually completely in league with Lily. Lily's faking this whole incident so that Kenton would leave the office and they can get this video. And so it's actually this brilliant turnaround for where you really thought everybody's allegiances were. It's a complete reversal, and it works so well.
And people were talking about, Lily's acting, and, people are really critical of her role in this. And this had to be such a hard scene to act and direct, because you had to tell the character, Lily had to act that she was acting. You know what I mean? So she got really big, and she was like, she had that like kind of really like verbal, like almost meltdown in Kenton's office, and she was like hyperventilating, and it's like she just had to leave. And she was overdoing it because she, of course, was, we later found out, like you just mentioned, she was acting because it was all part of this elaborate ruse to get him out of the office and so they could copy the video. But one thing that I thought was really interesting and telling, we learned a lot about Kenton in this scene, because when she got to the most like, over the top like panic attack, he didn't react. He sat there and he observed. He didn't react, and he didn't say like, "Oh, calm down," like, "Oh, let's get you like a warm towel," or something like let's like, "Can I make you some tea or something?" Like, no reaction. And so I can't tell in that moment if that is sort of like who he is as a character, that he doesn't react, or if he himself was like, "Is this for real?" Like he was kind of seeing through it a little bit. So, but I just thought that was really telling, and that's a great way to like write something in the script where a character doesn't have to say like, "I'm a badass and I have, formal training, security and special forces training." Instead, it's how they react in a scene can tell us a lot about who they are as a character, and maybe, like you said, like how dangerous they are, or or sleepy. Either way.
Well,
So
I think this is a combination of things. I think it is the fact that, because we find out later he's ex-military or ex something. We don't specifically know, but I mean,
oh no,
I think
just
it's earlier
earlier, because he's talking to the other, military
the security guy. That's right. It was earlier in this. That's right. In this episode,
Yeah.
it's earlier. He's talking to another guy who's like, "Don't you miss the adrenaline?" And he's like, "No, I don't." Which again tells you a lot.
Believe
He's
that?
like,
Do you
"I'm
believe
not
that
in it
though?
for the action."
Do you believe that?
I think that's true now because he's worked for Forrest and he's like, "I don't understand these nerds. Like, I don't understand what this is. I just know they keep causing me headaches, and I'm sick of having to put, Walmart bags on guys' heads out in the middle of the night when I just want to watch the Steelers, man. Can I just get a game in one weekend?"
It'd be the
It's like,
49ers.
"No, gotta kill a guy for seeing the Mystery Machine and recording it on his fucking watch." Excellent. So I think
And
at
then he
this
stabbed
point,
the guy in
he's
the
tired.
parking lot the night before, right? And got
Right,
stabbed.
and been stabbed.
So he doesn't
So, yeah,
miss it.
you know
He
what?
doesn't miss it. You're right. You're
Yeah,
right.
it's fine to say that if all you're dealing with are like, because the other guy's
Right.
like, "Oh, I just wish some guy would pull a gun." So obviously
Right.
that guy's arrogant and overconfident, whereas Kenton is dealing with real world problems due to somebody having a supercomputer that he thinks probably is just playing a super version of Pong. He's like, "I just don't need this shit anymore." So I do believe that he's kind of just tired and over it at this point. So I think it's that, but I also think that he's immediately calculating that, oh, she's got problems. This gives us a leverage point. So he's not reacting because she's doing him a favor. Now she's exposing a weakness that he's going to be able to exploit. So I think some of his calmness is, number one, what's she going to do? Charge him? She weighs like 80 pounds and he's already like killed a guy, suffocated a guy, been stabbed, and he's back at the office. So I'm pretty sure he thinks he could just kind of pirouette and throw her right out the window and it would be fine.
Right.
So I don't think he's worried. I think that's part of it. But I also think that he's probably had training in like crisis management and how to deal with unstable
interrogation.
people.
And interrogation.
And like I said, she's doing him a big favor because now he has this thing that he can be like, okay, worst case. And in fact, there's going to be a conversation we'll hear right after this that basically rolls this all out. Where it's like, oh, okay, this woman has now become far less of a concern than I thought she was because I now have multiple avenues and I don't even necessarily have to kill her. I can get rid of her and not have to strangle somebody else out in the woods. Happy day.
That would be
for
nice.
me.
That would be nice.
It would be nice. So yeah, but you're right. To see it the first time, you do wonder why he's not kind of reacting at all because she is getting, as you said, she stands up, she's kind of screaming, she's like, gesticulating all over the place, and she's, at the end saying, don't tell me you don't believe me. Like she is yelling it at Jen as well as Kenton, like nobody's believing me. Why isn't anybody believing me before she storms out? So I think it's supposed to be a kind of organic escalation as a performative. But Kenton, I think, is just taking everything because he probably also knows you have to be careful with people that especially are now expressing instability because you don't know what they're going to do. So I think that's part of it with him, but also the fact that now he sees a point of control that he'll be able to leverage later. So they steal the drive, they steal this video, and they leave, and they're in the car, and so we then get a scene, and I'm going to play both sides of the scene because one follows the other immediately. But this is really important because this is one of those times where I'm not going to specifically say what the line of this is, but this is this great writing where there's something that's going to be said that when you hear it the first time sounds like it's just referring to one thing, and then later you're like, oh, got it. This was actually a very intentional statement to somebody. And then we'll hear the reaction on the other side that's basically explaining that Lily and Jem were in this together the whole time. So this is just the two scenes where it's going to be Kenton and Forrest, and then Lily and Jen.
That was very close, Kenton. It nearly fucked the universe.
There's an upside, sir. We have an ace card with Lily Jem.
What ace card?
She's schizophrenic or something. According to her pal, she's had at least 2 previous episodes, one of which required hospitalization.
And we didn't know.
Well, she hid it, undeclared on her medical forms, in case she couldn't get the job. But it's cool. We can play that card anytime. Anything she says about us is dismissible. Anything that happens to her is explainable.
But nothing is going to happen to her, Kenton.
I know.
So where is she now?
Her buddy took her home. Seems to know how to handle her. And tomorrow we set her up with a shrink, one of ours. That keeps her both at arm's length and under observation. It's all okay, sir. We're still on your tram lines.
Holy motherfucking shit! That was Oscar level, Lils. Like, Jesus. The crying? Fucking incredible.
I didn't have to reach far to find that.
But still. And that Fibonacci stuff? The tattoo?
You told them I had a psychiatric history.
Yep, and they bought it. 100%. I mean, I fucking bought it.
Do you think they can check?
I think they can try, but...
I'll let you come in.
Where do they look?
After it ends.
You could have been in Canada or Mexico for all they know. Here. It's got exactly what you wanted.
Thank you so much.
No. He was my friend too.
Yeah, and I believe it's right after this too. We have some supervised sound, right? So, the sound supervisor picked a non, composed piece of music, Age of Aquarius, which you probably, if you've been alive, and maybe even seen the musical Hair, I think it was the Fifth Dimension was the band who did a version of it. But, this is the dawning of the Age of the Aquarius. It's very hippie. It's very San Francisco, right? But also the astrological implications are the Age of Aquarius is usually a time period that's defined as a sort of alignment of things kind of all coming together. And so once again, I thought it was appropriate. We talked about all the double layers that are happening within this show and within the writing. I even think the sound supervision, they're like, let's use a piece that is inherently San Francisco, kind of has that sort of vibe, but at the same time is also about, we get this sense that there's this event coming. Even early on, we know that all of this is going to kind of move towards something, especially, with some of the things we're seeing and we're hearing. I thought the Kenton Forrest exchange, to me, one of the things I really took away from that is there's a point, I don't think it was in this clip, but he's talking about, actually, this was just a little bit earlier with Lily. Kenton said, nothing is stranger than reality. And he's kind of trying to talk her down. So he's just saying whatever. But he has this moment where he's just kind of being like, yeah, sometimes the reality is stranger and it's kind of almost hard to believe. Which I think that goes into this whole idea of we have this prediction machine and I thought it was supposed to rain, it was going to rain, but it's not always right. It's not always precise. But yeah, what did you take away from it? Because clearly between the Forrest and Kenton scene, you took something out of that. You said it was different the first time versus the second time watching it.
Yeah, the specific line where he says, but nothing is going to happen to her. The first time I heard that, it was one thing. now knowing the ending of the show, it's another. And that's one of these great pieces of organic writing where what you hear the first time is, hey, no matter what,
don't hurt
she's,
her.
She's innocent. I don't want you doing anything. Like he's keeping the leash on her.
Don't put a bag over her head like you did.
Exactly. At this point, and some of that isn't
That's
necessarily.
how I took it. Yeah.
It's not necessarily benevolent. He may be like, we can't just keep piling bodies up. The government's here.
Right.
We have to be careful now. So if there's if we don't have to hurt her, let's not hurt her. But, and I won't give anything away, but then once you get further in, that now has a second meaning because it has to do with the tram lines and the idea that, hey, these things have to stay the way they are. And so again, in the scene the first time, sounds like somebody saying, hey, watch it. Because we're still not really, we're going to find out. But Forrest is still a little murky on terms of his morality. Obviously, he sanctions murder, but you don't think he's evil necessarily. And so maybe it is this thing where it's like, I will tolerate you killing traitors, but this woman is an innocent and she's lost somebody like I did, so watch it. Like, we're only going to go so far. But it then has this second meaning as you go on. So that's what I mean about that's clever writing, because it works without the knowledge and it works with the knowledge. And that's when you know somebody's done it correctly, is if it can work on both sides of the fence. If it only works on one side or another, it's clunky. But in this case, it works fine. And now, by the way, this is 35 minutes into a 45-minute episode. Right. And nothing has dragged. Nothing. And really very little has happened, honestly.
And when we hear the Aquarius montage, I'm like, oh, they're going to do the thing that they do in most TV series where they just play a song to get the IP, the royalties paid out, like in the last 5 minutes. And they'll just show all the characters like making soup or so, whatever. Like they just like, you see everyone in the cast, like, what are they doing right now? They're sleeping. They're listening to music. And that's what I thought they were going to do. And they started doing that. And then they quickly pull back out of that. Because we now have a scene with Jamie and Lily.
Yeah, so basically, Lily goes to Jamie and comes in through the window and says, now I guess you're just coming through the window. This is what you do now, which is pretty funny. And, a nice moment of humor, but also he clearly left the door open. So he kind of knew what was going to happen. So she comes in, she basically tells him, I have the footage of Sergei burning. And he's like, oh, all right, do you want to watch this alone? So Jamie clearly understands, like, oh, Jesus Christ, she's going to watch this guy die again. Like, he hasn't completely erased the fact that this guy meant something to her. And she's like, no, it's fine. Let's watch it. Because I think at this point, she doesn't believe it's real. So there's the idea of, I don't even think this is real, what's happening here.
I'm not really watching
based on everything going on.
Because I think she asked him, too, do you think he's still alive? Yeah, I think she even says, like, do you think he's still alive? And she's like, he could be. He could be.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that he could be. And so they watch the footage. And he does say, well, they can identify, I don't want to get morbid, but they can do more than just look at somebody. They could do dental, the rest of it. Even if somebody's burned beyond recognition, they have ways of identifying people. But he's like, all right, let's watch it. And as he's watching it, he's paying attention and he notices that the fire effect is digital because there's repeated frames. And that scene's great because one of the things when I'm in Photoshop and I'm replicating something, one of the things I pay attention to is, I can see the pixels duplicating. So let me fuzz this up so nobody can easily, you can still tell with forensic tools, but it's one of the things I always look for if I'm basically doing like a copy brush where I'm like, okay, I can tell that's a repeated frame. I have to smudge part of it or put some different pixels around. So it is an amateur mistake that you would think this company wouldn't make. It's one of the few times where I'm like, all right, plot is flexing a little bit for,
I thought it was an AI. I thought because maybe if a computer is doing it, like it wasn't an actual human doing it. It was the prediction model. The other thing I do like about the scene, there wasn't can you enhance that? Like, let's zoom in. Like there wasn't they're like, dude, if it's at a certain resolution, if you zoom in, it's going to be blurry. So they didn't do that. I think the camera got in like a closer shot or whatever, but we didn't have let's zoom and enhance that. And
no, they luckily, but I think the idea is, these are probably 4K cameras and you can still do some amount of
But you're right,
zooming,
though. It was so plain to see. That is kind of weird. And is that a plot issue? I feel like Garland doesn't really have with the tech. He's really savvy with the tech. So it doesn't seem like it's a plot thing where they're just like, oh, people believe it. It's almost like the people who made it were like, well, no one's going to question it, so we don't even have to spend the time.
Or that there were certain events that that had to happen in a certain order. And so it didn't really matter if they figured it out. Again, this gets into the determinism versus many worlds
maybe they
argument.
need to figure it out.
Yes, maybe there was no illusion, because don't forget, Katie and Forrest look ahead. So maybe it didn't matter. They knew it would happen, but the results that they wanted would still be in there somewhere. So again, yes, it's very possible, because it does seem very obvious, and it seems like something that anybody paying attention would see. But it's hard to know because we don't know everything that's going on yet. So is it a plot hole, or is it simply something that doesn't matter as much as we as the audience think it does? But either way, they figure out that it's fake and that the footage was faked. And now, of course, this confirms everything that Lily says. And then we're at the end of the episode where we get a reverse footage shot of them planting the body and burning it, which is a great shot, again, with the statue looking this thing of the statue, like looking down, like Thulsa Doom at you. It's like, Jesus, right. This thing.
And you got the Lux Eterna, like 2001 music where it's like the shrill voices and the shaking. And it's horror. Like right now, Amaya is like witnessing the horrible acts, right? And but my big thing is, like, once again, they finally got caught up. They finally know that they killed Sergei. But then immediately they're like, and this is how they did it. But they just still don't know how they did it. So I'm like, oh man, is the next episode they're going to be like figuring out how they doctored the video, or if they doctored the video, like, or how they actually did it, like, so they killed them. And so like they still don't know that they put a grocery bag over his head and then drag the body and set him on fire. So I just feel like that's really frustrating about the Lily scenes, is that a lot of times it's this catching up. But I kind of had an epiphany, and we'll talk about this as we go, merge into the next episode. I had this epiphany that a lot of the characters kind of are, like you said, looking ahead, like Katie and Forrest are looking ahead. So a lot of their experience is kind of frustrating, I would assume, because they kind of know what's already going to happen, or they know what needs to happen for what they want to happen. So it's almost like we're watching that as well. Like we kind of already know what happens because we've looked ahead, right? And not because we've watched the whole series, but just because we've seen that they killed Sergei. So we've known now since the end of the first episode, halfway through the first episode, everything that Lily has been trying to figure out for the last 2.5. So I think that's sometimes why these scenes are frustrating, but I wonder how intentional that is. I wonder if Garland wanted us to have that same frustration of, what if you knew the future and we're like kind of sitting around waiting for other people to figure it out?
Well, I think that's part of some of where we see, Forrest and Katie. I mean, Forrest gets upset when the senator sees Lily on the ledge, but that's more because the senator saw her on the ledge. But Kenton's the one who's really always concerned and trying to figure out how to control the situation, whereas Forrest never seems all that worried. Katie never seems to show much emotion at all. I mean, she's always just kind of like, no, everything is unfolding. And largely, again, she's one of these people who's like, everything is working the way it's supposed to. Don't worry. We know it's going to work. Like, she's very, very sure of what's happening, is always very calm and collected in almost every scene, at least so far. And so, like said, now the episode ends. Now we get another episode with this amazing opening where we're getting all these really harsh color shots, where we're getting close-ups of faces, and we don't know what any of it means because they're all literally colored in like green and red and blue with these harsh colors. And then we have an earthquake that happens. And this earthquake happens while Lyndon, Stewart, and Katie are working inside DEVS, inside the computer. And, I think Stewart or Lyndon was like, well, what if, this whole thing just collapsed into the ground if the magnets get disrupted? And Lyndon and Stewart are kind of going back and forth. And Stewart's like, yeah, you notice that Katie's not worried. She didn't ever get upset about that. And she says, yeah, it's because I know how the structural integrity of this building is. And I'm not worried because I know it's made of support. And he's like,
and Stewart's not buying it. He's like, I know you look ahead. I know you break
Stewart's
the rule.
Like, or is it that she's calm because she knew that nothing was going to happen? And it's a great scene because, again, it is exactly what Forrest said. They know we break the rules, so it's fine. It's one of these things that, Stewart in the last episode said it. He says it. He's basically saying it again without saying it here is, we know you guys are full of shit because you run the show. So, of course, the bosses always abuse whatever the tech is.
Right.
And so
But this is the rules are made up for control, and it's clear even to everybody that these aren't like sacred rules, like don't, maybe don't cross the streams, whatever. But they do actually, they end up crossing the streams, so it's okay. But yeah, this is not a safety thing. It's more of that. Katie and Forrest want to remain in control.
Well, and now I'm going to play a clip that actually is where I think it is the crossing the streams reveal, that actually this is legitimately dangerous. Up till now, it did seem like kind of an arbitrary rule where it's always like, well, the bosses want the best stuff for themselves. But now we're going to get a scene where we see Forrest inside the room doing a projection, and Katie walks in, and they're going to have a back and forth, which I think, to me, is where the rules now become more than just control, and they actually become threatening to the entire idea of what DEVS is trying to accomplish.
Is it wise to retread these steps? Or is it helpless?
I don't need a lecture, Katie.
What if someone else had walked in instead of me? If the technicians see you accessing the future, it makes it seem as if the rule is open to being broken.
They know not to break the rule. And they know we do break the rule.
You still shouldn't be watching this. It doesn't help. What were you doing? Checking that the tram lines remain intact?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm just scared.
Of what?
Us. Me and you. Everything we do is predicated on the idea that we live in a physical universe, not a magical universe.
Are you doubting that?
Not the physical universe. But I am scared we might be magicians. What if we project 1 minute into the future, right now?
Forrest.
What if, Katie? What if 1 minute into the future, we see you fold your arms and you say, fuck the future. I'm a magician. My magic breaks tram lines. I'm not going to fold my arms. You put your hands in your pockets and you keep them there until the clock runs out.
Cause precedes effect. Effect leads to cause. The future is fixed in exactly the same way as the past. The tram lines are real. In 48 hours, Lily will die. There's no magic. Effectively, it's already happened.
They're gonna kill me.
Okay, so this is where I think the rules go from being just don't do it to, well, what if they watch something in the future and decide not to do it? That's Forrest's concern. He says it to Katie, but it could be anybody, really, if they
It's
look
kind
ahead.
of like the butterfly effect, right? Like if you go back and you change one thing, and that one thing could be having a knowledge of the future, right? So like knowing what's going to happen. So that yeah, it could mess it all up. I also like how he kind of is having a crisis of sort of faith in the machine too, where he's saying like, is this all just, are we just magicians? Are we tricking ourselves? And I think about like The Illusionist, all those wonderful movies about, is the trick really real? Is this all hocus pocus, or are we actually predicting the past, or are we just tricking ourselves? And then, like you said, he brings in the complication of like, yeah, and if by seeing the future, what's going to happen. So I guess you're right. It's exactly like Cross the Streams, right? The reason you don't do it is because Egon said it would collapse the universe or something like that. So yeah, there's a reason not to look ahead.
Yeah, that's what I mean is up to now, I think what you thought is what most people would think is, okay, they just want to keep the best toys for themselves. That's a very typical thing. And now, by introducing doubt, where Forrest generally comes off as very certain, I think Katie's the only one he ever expresses any kind of uncertainty to that we've seen so far. And she has absolutely no doubt. That's the other thing is she is just like, no, it is exactly what we thought. Nothing's going to happen. Everything is fine. And he has this kind of, well, yeah, maybe. But the fact that he says, well, you could break this if we're in a magical universe, I think that is his fear, is that somebody watches it. It is a very kind of human concept, this idea that you have to hold on to this one hope you've got and you can't take any chances. And that's the kind of the danger of control, is that you will do anything to stop somebody from piercing that bubble. And so this is what he's kind of doing, is he's basically going, I mean, it is a test of his own faith, which, isn't how faith works, but that's what he's trying to do, is just make sure that nothing's been altered. And then we get that line at the end where she says, well, Lily's going to die. It's already happened, which is your morality clause, where it's like, hey, what are you going to do? She's going to die. Sorry. But and that feels like also a way of keeping him from having any doubts about what he's doing, where he's like, no. And that goes back to the line of, but you're not going to do anything to her, right, Kenton? Because now we find out there is a time frame, and that time frame must be kept. So nothing can happen between now and that time frame, or else it's a magical universe and everything falls apart. But I also like them to cut straight to Lily saying, they're going to kill me.
Kill me.
She obviously doesn't know, but it's just this nice hard cut to it, which I'm like, oh, absolutely. That's cute. I like that. That's a nice little edit there. I like how that works. And so now she's in Jamie's apartment.
Well, but notice, by the way, in that scene, you pointed this out last episode about in episode 1 when they're having the conversation out among the gold posts, the Faraday posts, Katie and Forrest. There was no music. There was just the establishing sounds of being outside. Once again, in this scene, in these heart-to-hearts, there was no music. A little bit of music comes up at the end to kind of segue from one scene to the other. You hear the humming of the machine.
I was going to say, that's a sound effect. That's not even music. That's the kind of dissolving particle effect. So that's kind of your kind of segue or dissolve to the next scene, which is like, yeah, I'm going to die now. And so... yeah, but you're right.
I think that foreshadows a little bit too about like they have this kind of more than just, they have maybe more of an intimate relationship, or they have these moments where they really, what's is nice, they can actually, they're kind of equally intelligent, so they can kind of have an argument with each other, where I feel like, he can't maybe probably relate to a lot of the other employees who, are just haven't seen the future, right? So that's the burden. They can share that burden together too. They both kind of
it really does feel like he needs her to be the person who believes the whole time, because he is having doubts. So it feels like if he didn't have her, you wonder that there would probably be somebody that he would have to find, that he needs somebody to basically quell his doubts, and that's what her function is. Whether it's any more than that, well, we'll have to wait for the rest of the show to go on. But at this point, she just seems to be the person that's there saying, no, boss, you're right. You're right about everything. You know what you're doing. Stay the course. Everything's fine.
Stay on the tram.
So, yep. Stay on the tram lines. The tram lines are still there. The trolley's on them. Don't worry about it. We're fine. And so then we jump to Jamie's apartment, which is very green, which again, there was this color usage, which I don't remember this kind of green permeation being anywhere in the first 2 episodes. It was very gold, gold, black was most of it. And there's just all this green. And in the opening, the person who was green was Forrest, which, I was like, oh, Forrest, his name is Forrest, he's green. And I'm like, okay, the green color, he's the only one who has the green color, if I remember correctly. Let me verify that, just to make sure I don't have this.
Yeah, because we see them, it's like clear they're maybe looking at the machine, like at the projection screen. At least that's what I'm thinking. And they're all lit in different colors. There's reds, and yeah, I think Forrest, like you mentioned, is green.
And he's the only one that's green. There's alternating blue, red for everybody else, but he in particular is green. And then Jamie's apartment is just very green, and the whole
So why do you think that
tinted.
is? So why do you think that is?
I think at this point what we've understood is Lily is vitally important to what's going on, meaning to Forrest. And also, as this is going on, she's clearly becoming more important to Jamie. So it's almost that Green is supposed to kind of, I assume, communicate the importance of Lily to other people. I don't know. This is pure speculation, but I don't know what else it could mean because it's obviously specifically chosen. You don't just, there are no accidents in filmmaking of this type, and especially not with this type of thing. So the fact that Forrest is green, it's a brighter green. It's not the same green. That would have been really, really interesting if it was the same green, but it's a brighter, harsher green. But still, now we immediately jump from Lily's going to die to them in a very green apartment. And this is where basically...
Oh, well, wait. So here, this is conspiracy theory 101 here. So if he was watching them in his apartment, Jamie's apartment, if the apartment was mostly green, the giant projection screen would be projecting green onto his face.
Sure. Yeah. And now I'm looking at the video. Lily is also wearing a green sweater. It's all greens. And even Jamie's got kind of a muted green shirt. So, yeah.
So maybe in that cold open, we were watching Forrest watching
Well, because he is
Jamie.
watching her when Katie comes in. It's just not that particular moment. So, yeah, it does line up. I don't think that's conspiracy theory at all. That makes sense that he is monitoring Lily all throughout what's going on. And it does line up with, how the tram lines would have to go. So no, that's exactly what it is. I didn't pick that up. I was thinking more of the importance, but it makes complete sense. And again, telling us stuff before it happens, before we even know it happens, just through visual kind of storytelling and color. So they have this conversation back and forth where Jamie's like, let's call the cops. And she's like, no, we can't get the cops involved. You think they don't own the cops? Like, where she obviously thinks that this is a big grand conspiracy. And she's like, I'm just going to go home and I'm going to figure out how to do this myself. And she leaves. And she has this thing about, this is maybe why they broke up. They have this exchange about, I remember how it was dating you. And then they kind of, have almost like a
Which
mini
happens
fight
when you reconnect with somebody. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. There was like this thing. And like, can we overcome that?
When you're in loss, all you remember are the good times. And then once you're back into it, you're like, oh yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were some rough edges going on here too, weren't there? Yes, that does actually happen, folks. If you're really young, I got news for you. That happens. But we're not talking about that for this episode. So let's jump back into
Uncle
the show.
Joe.
No problem. Hey, life is great.
Hey, kids.
So the tram line, sometimes there's some bumps. That's all I'm telling you. The tram line's got some bumps. That's okay. You'll get through it. So now we see Kenton show up at Lily's apartment, and she's not there, but Peter's there. And here again, very specific exchanges between the two of them, which will pay off later. So he's there, he's looking for her, and Pete immediately does not like him. He's like, what do you want? He's like, and when Lily shows up, he says, stranger danger. And so as they're sitting there waiting, they're kind of going back and forth. And there's a part where Kenton seems to be trying to intimidate him. And Pete's like, I'm not afraid of you. And Kenton says, yeah, I can see that. I'm just trying to figure out why. And again, within the context of this scene, you may not really understand what's going on there. It may just seem like because he's basically living on the street, he's like, what do I have to be afraid of? I'm on the street. Why are you going to be scary to me? And plus, he's not in bad shape. I mean, he looks like he's probably at least relatively physically fit compared to Kenton, who's got a bit of a gut. So, and not knowing anything about Kenton's background, but we don't know anything about Pete's background either. He could have been special
Pete
forces
has like
as well.
really, really rosy cheeks. I feel like Pete probably has very high blood pressure. So
yeah,
and maybe a healthy
probably.
drinking problem. Yeah.
I would venture to guess that living on the street is probably stressful, and you probably have to find your release in different ways. So sure, I mean, you're not going to have the rosiest complexion when you don't have access to basic medical necessities and care and a roof over your head. So yeah, sure.
Yeah, they do a great job too with the costume design to really make it look. He's got like the sweat stains on him. And even just like, it looks like he's like, so he has red cheeks from maybe high blood pressure, but also just like being outside. Like he really does look kind of weathered from the weather. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, he looks like exactly what some people on the street will look like when they don't have somewhere to go. We never see him anywhere but on their doorstep and on the street. So presumably that's where he's staying. We don't even see him in a tent or anything at this point. So yeah, it's not good for you to be exposed. That's why you can die from exposure. So basically, Kenton's waiting there. Lily shows up, and Pete says, and here again, this is great foreshadowing, where he says, hey, if anything goes on, I've got your back. And as they drive off to go to the psychiatrist, Pete makes a guns
Right.
gesture,
Which
and it's
I
going
just
bang,
assume,
bang, bang.
I just always assume, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's so high right now. Like he's just like on another planet. Yeah.
And again, this is where, and this is a bit of foreshadowing. I'm giving a little
Sure.
bit away here,
Yeah,
but this is one of
we
those things
can't
where
divulge, but keep an
no,
eye on
can't
Pete.
divulge, but this is one of those scenes
yeah.
where, like I said, when a scene works in having knowledge and not having knowledge, because you just think that he just wants to screw with anybody in authority, which is not uncommon. I do it myself. So I completely understand the impulse. I get it.
I think though, even just like watching characters, I might have not understood some of the math stuff that was going on at this point, but just being like, wait, why is Pete still in the series? So I was like, okay, Pete's going to have some significance or something, because why is he still now? It's the 4th episode. Why is he still hanging out on the doorstep? So that started to get kind of weird. I'm like, why did they? It's not like he was a famous actor or something, and they wanted to like feature him or something in the show. So that started to get kind of suspicious of like, why is he still in this show?
Well, this is kind of my wife and I watch certain things, because I watch far more than my wife does. She's not nearly as much of a movie and TV hound as I am. So there's certain parts where I'm like, okay, that character is going to be important. And later she'll be like, well, how did you know? I'm like, because basic storytelling is that's the Chekhov's character. You don't have a person that keeps showing up if they're not going to matter. I mean, if you do, it's bad storytelling. So sometimes it happens, and that's the sign that, okay, they didn't know what they were doing.
Well, just real quickly, like a stop on that. Like that's one of the things I wanted to say too at the start of this whole conversation was rewatching it a second time now. A lot of what I'm seeing, I'm saying, oh no, they were telling me what was going on the whole time. I wasn't listening. I didn't understand. I wasn't clear on what was going on, but they were telling me. And so it's like, in a bad murder mystery, it would be bad if you've always met the character in the murder mystery. Like if it's Agatha Christie, there's like 7 characters and one of them did it. It just would be bad form. It's against the rules to just bring in somebody who's entirely not in, because that's not fair. And that's kind of maybe how I felt the first time I watched it. I felt like it was like not fair, but now rewatching it, I'm like, dude, it was all there. It was all there. They were telling me explicitly. I just wasn't listening.
Yeah, there's a really effective setup and payoff, and that's what I mean about if you write it badly, it will not work the second time. You'll know everything. And you're like, yeah, this is now boring because it's so clearly spelled out or so incoherently set up where you're like, this doesn't make any sense at all that that's what happened later. So there's the problem where you can either be too obvious or you can be so clunky and clumsy about it that it doesn't retain your interest on the second time. Then there are the rare cases where it's done really well. I think Columbo is one of them, where the murderer from the beginning, and the whole show is just about him bumbling around and going, okay, yeah, and almost getting them to admit to, because they're like, oh, this dummy, what can he know? So that's an example of how you can go against the formula, or something like this, where the writing works either way, because you are seeing the pieces being put in place as they're going, but not in a way that either loses your interest or makes you think, yeah, this is not actually all that complicated. Now that I know the ending, why am I even rewatching it? Because that's the other danger, is rewatching something like this where there is a lot of mystery. You can be like, well, I already know what this is. What's the point? And there are movies and TV shows that are like that, where it's like, okay, this doesn't hold up on the second viewing. This one does. But I also think that's part of those really disruptive openings, is the first time watching it, it is to almost flush some of the details out, because you're like, what is this? And so you lose some of the details, and so you sort of forget things here and there. You might have forgotten that Pete was even in the show for a while, and then he suddenly shows up, and you might be like, oh, okay, he's there so that somebody can witness Lily being picked up, and that's going to be his function, because when she disappears, the cops are going to suddenly find Pete, and he'll be like, well, I saw her go with that guy, because that's the kind of the normal thing that might happen in an ordinary show that isn't doing this kind of crazy level shit. So Ken picks her up, and she sort of resists. She says, I don't want to go. And he's like, well, listen, let's go. Let's see this doctor, and then we're done. We just do this, and then we're over with, and I'm out of your hair, and it's done.
And he's kind of calling her bluff. Like, he doesn't know if she's faking it or if she's not, or if she really is crazy. But either way, like you said, it's kind of a foothold for him to get some leverage.
From his perspective, it's a win-win. If she's lying, he will know about it. If she's telling the truth, he now has a documented specialist saying that this woman is a potential danger to herself. And so that's the beauty of this is it works either way, whether he's suspicious or not, and he probably is. But either way, either side that this goes, it's an upside for him in his mind because he's got her either way. So they go and they see the psychiatrist, and Lily is basically not fooling him as far as having a background because he's asking her questions. And there is a point where I'm sitting there going, you might have wanted to basically do a quick search for how do I fake being schizophrenic? You know, what are the signs?
What are the key? Yeah. You got read the book.
He's giving her kind of openings where he's like, well, describe what happened. Okay, even if you don't know specifics. And it's something where it's like, if you'd actually thought this a little bit through, you would have figured out how you kind of fake this. The same way that if somebody's faking a neck injury, they're like, oh yeah, I have a pain that radiates down through my shoulders only if I turn left. And you're like, okay, well, we can't disprove that, so I guess. I mean, mental illness is like that as well, where it becomes tough to disprove it if you get past certain goalposts. But if you just come up blank, which she does, where she's like, yeah, I don't remember anything. I don't remember when it happened the last time. Just very, very surface level stuff. And of course, this does, as far as we can tell, he's a real psychiatrist. So they are trained to pick up somebody who's trying to, let's say, do workman's comp and faking an illness. Yeah. So he sees right through it.
Insanity. Yeah. Insanity, please. Yeah.
So he basically, Kenton says, oh, well, let me go settle the bill with this guy. And he says, okay, what do you think? And the psychiatrist says, well, she clearly has some problems, but I don't think she has a history. There's no sign of it there. And he's like, okay, got it. And so they get in the car and he's like, all right, I'm going to take you home. And so then we cut to DEVS. And in between here and the other scenes, we've seen kind of Lyndon's been sitting there and kind of getting annoyed. And then we see this thing. And I like how it's all done silently. We just see it in silhouette where he's clearly had a breakthrough and he's talking to Stuart. And you see him and Stuart's like, all right, calm down. What's going on? And we understand that Lyndon has had some kind of idea or breakthrough. And now this is a long clip, but I think it's worth playing the whole thing. And this is where basically everybody in DEVS is assembled because Lyndon is now going to explain the breakthrough that he's had that we've only seen kind of, like I said, miming of. Now we're going to get the actual explanation and Forrest's reaction to it.
Okay. We have a prediction system based on ultramassive data. The data goes to a subatomic level, so we're fully in the world of quantum mechanics, using a fully deterministic interpretation for which we use a version of de Broglie bomb, pilot wave. And it works. Kind of.
We glimpsed Christ on the cross.
Exactly. We didn't see him or hear him. We glimpsed him through a blizzard of variances. The boss doesn't like variances.
The binary problem in our quantum system, it either works totally or not at all. Right?
Right.
And particularly bad for me because I'm focused on sound waves, which are mega fragile and the variances go wild mega fast. So most of my day I'm hearing shit like this. An elegant, ugly dropout. And it gets worse the further we travel back in time, and the worse is exponential.
Now, hearing that shit through my headphones all day, it drives me a little crazy, so I figure I need a break. I get up just to clear my head for a while. And I find myself over at our core computer, thinking about how crazy all this shit is. Entanglement, superpositions, all the voodoo. And I'm thinking, fucking de Broglie bomb, fucking pilot wave, fucking hidden variables. I wish I could ditch them all. So I did.
كاريا هي لا لنفسي عظمى لموتى قولي أرقى واشعروا عمي.
That's a projection?
Yeah.
It's fucking crystal.
What language is that?
It's Aramaic.
From 2,000 years ago.
That's Jesus talking?
Tell him what you fucking did.
I switched out de Broglie bomb for the Everett interpretation.
Many worlds.
Still deterministic.
Deterministic because everything that can happen will happen.
And that's as deterministic as you can get.
cute, Lyndon. It's a cute party trick.
A hell of a party. Glad I'm invited.
No. It's a waste of time. And it's dangerous.
Why is it dangerous?
Because it's seductive. As I can see from all your faces, lit up, hearing Jesus talk, getting nerd hard-ons. But let's all just be clear, it's not actually Jesus talking, is it?
No, it is Jesus talking.
But not our Jesus from our history. It's a Jesus from a history. And every time you run the system, you'll get a different outcome.
But the difference might be a single hair on Jesus' head.
No. It will be that difference, and 3 hairs difference, and 4, and 1,000. And all points in between and either side.
That's your response to what I've just achieved? We're splitting hairs.
No, Lyndon. This is my response. You're fired.
What?
You're fired. You've undermined everything I'm trying to do.
Katie.
Forrest.
Shut up, Katie.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding anyone. This is a message to the whole team. If you didn't know it with the Russian kid, you know it now. I will not accept this project being undermined. Lyndon, you'll get your DEVS separation pay, $10 million. And if you talk about your work here to anyone, in any context, at any time, I'll know. Now get your stuff and get out.
So I just hearing this now listening to it the third time, right? I just thought of something. So he said, you know what happened to the Russian kid? So does everyone know in DEVS that they murdered Sergei? Like, does everyone in DEVS know that they killed him or that he was, excommunicated or,
I'll be honest. I go back and forth on this because, I mean, it's tough to say in that, is it supposed to be a thing where this is such a devastating thing to be fired from this that it might drive somebody to kill themselves? Or is he explicitly admitting to murder? Because that seems dicey to me. So I wonder if it's more that this is essentially being blacklisted from ever doing something like this again, or you've worked on something so great that you will never get the chance to do this again in your life. Because once this works, because I'm sure everybody assumes it works, that it will change everything and there won't be a point in anything else and you won't be a part of it. It's difficult to say because you have to remember that people like this probably view themselves as the smartest people on the planet, working at the greatest company on the planet. And it's easy to say, well, that it can't possibly, that he's just speaking to ego. Yes, it could be. Look around. Ego will drive people to do really wacky things that you would sit there and go, what's sensible? No, there is no sensible. These people have bought into themselves to such a degree that this is what they'll do. Now, Stewart clearly knows because right after this, we get a short scene, which is a great scene between him and Lyndon, where he's like, look, you're young. Yeah. Do you know what he's saying? He is going to kill you if you don't leave right now. And so I don't know if that's supposed to communicate that everybody's just aware of this and okay with it, which again, in that scene, we see probably 20 people, I want to say 15, 20 people in the room, as many of whom we'll never see again. They're just supposed to be part, because obviously it's more than just 4 people. Are they all okay with murder? It seems dubious. Do they suspect? But again, him saying you all saw it with the Russian kid, that's not a confession. That could just, he could obviously say, well, I mean that he went crazy because I fired him from the greatest project on earth that's going to change everything. So I don't know. It's difficult for me to know what, or did he just lose his temper for a minute and say something that, because this is a rare case where Forrest gets really angry and now you understand, and it makes complete sense. We know he's obsessed with his daughter. We know that he's been, that this is starting to, you could start to suspect what's going on. And
I still have no idea what's going on. So I don't understand why, if somebody came up with something that would make it better, why he's so fixed on the tram lines. I think, you know, later on we'll discover that more. But that was my second question was, did Katie and Forrest know this was going to happen? Did they know Lyndon was going to come up with some type of new algorithm or new approach to analyzing the data or making the projections that, so was this a surprise to him? Is that why Forrest was so angry? Is because this is not something that they had foreseen or predicted or, you know, previously saw?
Well, again, this is where, I mean, there's a certain danger in analyzing something like this where you're talking about, you know, the future and what they did or didn't know, because they may have known, and this may have been exactly what he said. This is a message to the team. I need no one else to do this. So yes, okay. Lyndon was going to be the one who did it. Someone was going to do it, and we needed to have an example. Lyndon ended up being the example. That's fine. That's what we needed to make sure that everybody else stays on the tram lines. So it's difficult to say. Now, obviously, we know things that will come ahead. We don't want to go too far ahead, but based on things that happen later,
but
I would suspect that they knew.
Is that why Stewart said, listen to me? Because Stewart's also been looking ahead, and he knows what's going to happen.
Well, see, this is where, again...
it gets murky, right? It's really murky. It's more than just Biff, like having the sports almanac and betting on future sporting events.
It's extremely murky. That's the point, is we really don't know. And the thing is, we don't know what happened in between, because Lyndon obviously told Stewart about the breakthrough. Did they go in the room and watch it? And then did Stewart stay and see what happened and Lyndon didn't? We don't know any of those things. So based on what we see, I think that the only thing we concretely can say is that Stewart clearly understood what the real threat was, had enough caring about Lyndon to say, get out now. But whether they really knew or not, who knows what? It's so tough to say, because based on the encounter with Katie and Forrest at the beginning of the episode, apparently anybody can just go in that room and use the machine. You would assume that Forrest and Katie are monitoring their usage. They would have to know. So did one or both of them, because he says, shut up, Katie, which we've never seen that. That's, again, a new thing where he tells her to shut up in front of everybody. And up to this point, she's been in the one in control, and he is now angry to a point of telling her to shut up. So is this all performative? Is this because, again, they did this to basically, I mean, we saw Lily and Jen do that. They performed a scene to accomplish a goal. It's really hard to say. It does make you analyze it and think, what is actually happening or not? Because if the tram lines are true and they do project in the future, they say they do it, then they would have to have known this would happen. So if they knew, why bring Lyndon in? Did they need Lyndon to be the one who does this so that they can get rid of Lyndon because Lyndon didn't have the secret knowledge or whatever you can lose yourself in speculation. And the nice part is
clearly Lyndon wasn't looking ahead, because they would have known.
And I think that goes into the ego.
Because they were in shock. They were in shock that they got fired, right? So,
but that's the thing, right? If you are so sure you have the answer, why would you need to look? You were right. You figured it out. You got the part that nobody could cracked. I don't need to look at anything else. I solved the problem. What more evidence do I need if my ego is the size of the entire world? That's what I mean about these people. They are like that in many cases. So I think what I like about the show.
I have one more question. Yeah. One more question about this. This is so rich, this segment here. This is like a really rich part, and I'm so glad you captured it and shared it with us. My last question is, and this is a philosophical one. I don't know if we can answer this one. It's philosophical or scientific, either way. And maybe you understand this, because I don't think I quite grasp this. So we're hearing Jesus speak, right? So is it really Jesus, though? Like, it's not actually ever Jesus. What either, if we're using the deterministic one or the multiverse, it's never really Jesus. It's a prediction of what his voice might sound like and what he might have said. Is that correct? Or so, like, when they start splitting hairs about, well, which Jesus is it? Is it a Jesus? In the multiverse, when, like Forrest is so angry because he's saying, well, it's not our Jesus. It's not the Jesus from our timeline. It could be any of these Jesuses from any of these sort of like alternate timelines or dimensions or whatever your understanding of that is. But the original is not actually like going into the past. I'm not going back and hearing Jesus speak from his own mouth. I'm using a computer to predict what he said. So that's my question is it actually really Jesus's voice? And does it matter whether it's the deterministic one or the multiverse one? Why does it matter?
So in just pure happenstance, because I really wasn't, it was just something that happened. I watched this video, not really, because the video's title was, well, do you really have free will? I didn't know it was about determinism, right? Now, based on the most, as I understand it, because I'm not going to pretend I'm some kind of, philosophical genius either. But as this individual explained it, who did seem to be way smarter than me, if you go by the most hardcore interpretation of determinism, then as long as you can compute all the previous causes that led to the current thing, then you can identify every link in the chain backwards. So in theory, if this computer is strong enough or can compute the numbers and the scenarios correctly enough, then it should be able to accurately go basically backwards to reverse engineer, to use a technical term for it. It should be able to reverse engineer what happened in the past with total accuracy if you accept pure determinism, as some people do. So in that particular view, and that's what you assume that Forrest believes, he believes that's Jesus. The problem is once you bring the many worlds idea into it, as he says, which Jesus? And the problem is that we obviously know he's obsessed with his daughter. We've seen him see her, like try to view her. And in fact, right after this, Katie gets very upset with him and comes in the room and basically says, yeah, I turned her algorithm on and here's your daughter, and shows him this crystal clear projection. Which is
like, that's a tier, like heartbreaking scene to watch because it's just, it's
and if you think about that, that's basically Katie's like stab back at him for doing something she disagrees with. And it's actually a ruthless scene without being a big explosive fight, but it is a savage blow for what she does to him because it breaks him down.
So they didn't know. Then they didn't know. If she went and did that, so Forrest didn't know. Katie might have known, but Forrest didn't know that Lyndon was going to do this or what the outcome of it was.
Or to go back to his conversation with Katie, where he says, I existed in two states. Because this is the interesting part about
Lily,
this mindset.
Where he's like, I believed it and I didn't believe it, which is still binary, right? I believed it or I didn't believe it. Yeah.
Based on what Forrest says, looking at that projection, so trying to imagine it was me in that scenario, that I'd lost somebody. Now I have children, so I would have to project my wife, let's say. My wife was dead.
It would be horrible, yeah.
But if I saw the projection, I would not be able to have no reaction. It just
whether
would not
it was
be
magic,
possible.
whether it was AI, whatever, like,
yes,
or a projection or whatever, yeah.
But simultaneously, I would know that there was almost no chance it's actually her. And so my reaction is purely mine, but it's not her. So if she was suddenly manifested, I wouldn't believe it was her. And the little differences would become very apparent. That's what his idea of one hair becomes 1,000, right? Because especially when it's people, like if you're talking about, a car, you can recreate a car with precision and it's the same car. Yeah, you didn't own it before, but they rebuilt the car. It's going to drive the same and you're going to still understand it's the car. But it's that, what is it? There's the something Aramaic ship or whatever. If you replace too many parts, it's no longer the same thing. But with people, it is such minute things that make people love each other. The flaws as well as the things that you love about them are all the things that add up to why you respond. And so even the smallest variance, this is why the cloning idea, people think it's a good idea. No, it isn't, because it's not really. Lando and I have debated this endlessly, where it's like, if you don't have a continuum of your soul or your consciousness, clone is useless because they will not react the same. And it might be something as small as the two of you just both loved mint chocolate chip ice cream and it was this special thing. And now the other version says, yeah, I don't really like this. And just that little difference suddenly introduces all the cracks into everything else, and you will never be able to accept that person the same way.
It's kind of like a Turing test. It's like the
Yes,
Turing
exactly.
test, right? Yeah, it's like you're seeing, instead of seeing the robot as a robot, you're seeing the algorithm. You're identifying the limits of the algorithm.
And this,
Yep.
I think, that scene where she has this projection play, I think that's basically her way of saying, you think you're so right, let's see if you don't cry when you see your daughter. Here, let's find out. And of course, he still reacts because he still has that two-state problem.
On the two-state problem, and that makes it even more heartbreaking now, because now it's like he was sad to see, it was beautiful joy to see his daughter, but then he also knew it wasn't real, but it was real, but it wasn't. Here's my one thing about that scene, though. This is another scene, and this is like my new, this time watching it the second time, I'm trying to break down predictions that were publicly viewed by like a lot of people or by a shared group, and predictions that were private that no one else witnessed. This just seems to be Amaya playing with bubbles in a room. Like the most like beautiful childhood moment of just a child in the afternoon sunlight is coming in through the window and she's just blowing bubbles. No care in the world. It's probably thinking about like candy.
Before, we've seen him trying to get this and it was really fuzzy. So we've seen the
we
same
didn't know,
scene, but it wasn't
maybe
as clear.
didn't even know what he was looking at. We like saw like, oh, that's got to be his daughter. But now it was clear as day. And the music is really beautiful in this as well. The really nice Ben Salisbury track here, where it's almost just like kind of like this organ. So it feels kind of like the Gregorian chant a little bit. It feels sacred in a way. And it's just this beautiful scene. And yeah, it gets me every time I watch it, twice, right? Every time I hear it, it gets me even just thinking about it, because you're right, though. I didn't think about it in that way, though, that he not only was crying because he was seeing his daughter, but he also knew it wasn't real.
But in some ways, I don't know that Katie did what she thinks she did, because he talks about the seduction of using that method. And this is exactly what he's talking about, is in the intellectual side, you know that there's almost no chance this is actually her. Now, it could be. You could get that lucky. But if the projection went on, would suddenly somebody else that wasn't him come in the room and she calls him daddy? Imagine that scenario, right, where he's not the father.
In that verse, yeah, she didn't have a dad or something, or he's dead in that one or whatever. So she's sad. Like it could just be this sounds like a Twilight Zone episode now, right? Where he goes back to get his daughter, but in that verse, he's dead, and then she's dead. They can never get into the same verse.
Well, I mean, this is essentially a Twilight. I mean, it's what it is. This is kind of, because you're supposed to struggle with this and try to figure out what's going on. I mean, that is the whole, I think, goal of this show until it gets to the very end. And even then, there's stuff that we don't really know. So we'll get to that when we get to it. But basically, the only other thing we haven't talked about, because we're at the end of the episode at this point, is that Kenton basically says to Lily, they're driving back from the psychiatrist, and he doesn't let on at all that the psychiatrist is like, yeah, she's full. He's like, yeah, the problem is you're a danger to yourself. That's what he told me. So we're going to have you committed. Now, you can speculate on whether he was actually going to just kill her or not, but I don't think so. I think the intent was to keep her in a controlled environment so that she was still alive. But then she grabs the wheel and smashes the car into a barrier and escapes, even though she's dazed. We see Kenton come out, and that's where he lifts his shirt, and you see that the impact has ripped his sutures open. Yeah. Right. He's having a bad week, man. He's just never going to get to see that Steelers game. That's what I'm saying, is when you see what he's had to go through, yeah, I don't think he's missing the action at all. So basically, Lily goes back, says to Jamie, you were right. We have to call the cops. Let's call them right now. They call them. They report the crime. Cops show up, except they show up because they basically said, oh, you recklessly endanger this person's life. The psychiatrist is there and says, yes, she's mentally unstable. She needs to be committed. They drag her away. And the last thing we see is Kenton pushing Jamie into the apartment and saying, hey, Jamie. And then we basically go to the credits and the episode is over. So again, another just devastating cliffhanger, because you don't know what's coming next.
You know, some type of Marathon Man-esque like bullshit is going to go down. So like torture, you just know, like I'm not giving anything away, but you just know like this is not going to be good.
No, something not good is going to happen. That's not even vaguely spoilerish. I mean, his tone of voice, the fact that he just got into a car wreck, it's like, this is not going to be them playing, checkers for an hour and talking about how, how great the baseball game was last week.
Right.
No, this is going to be
because he didn't
bad
see it. He was in
way.
a car crash. He was murdering people in the woods.
Oh, yeah. It's like, man, have you ever strangled somebody with a plastic bag? Let me tell you about how much that brings your week down. And then we go to credits, and that's the end of the episode. So again, it flew by, even though we did get big stuff.
They tease with they're gonna call the cops, so you expect the cops to show up so that they can like divulge the secret, and instead it's this ambush where Lily's being committed, and like you said, Kenton's gonna have a little one-on-one time.
Prove Lily was right where she said, well, how do we trust the cops? But she was thinking conspiracy. Not that they would just arrange things in a way that to the cops, it looks like she is acting out and she is a danger to herself and others. I mean, from the cops' perspective, with a psychiatrist and the security guard with all the documented stuff, it does sure look like she's going to, she almost did kill Kent. She could have killed him or others. So certainly you understand where they're coming from. But yes, basically, you think when they show up, oh, this is great. Because they're like, okay, your name is this and this. And she's like, I'd like to report a crime. And like, all right, turn around. And then right away, And even Jamie's like, whoa, what? And then once you see the psychiatrist, then you as the audience know exactly what's going on. And that, like I said, last scene is him being pushed in by Kenton, and that's it. And
the way it's shot is really wonderful too, because you hear them go to the door and you're kind of behind them, like waiting to come around the corner to kind of see the front door and see the cops at the front door. And you start to hear them before you can really see what's going on. There's a bit of a commotion. And like you said, Jamie. So once again, like the storytelling is always really great. And there's a lot of like kind of preventing us from seeing what's going on. And this is just another one of those like kind of cliffhanger endings as well. And remember, like we said, this is week to week back in 2020, probably. So you had to wait, till the next week to figure out what was going to happen next.
But even knowing I could just go to the next episode, I immediately wanted to go to the next episode. That's what I mean about it holds
that was
up
the problem.
In terms of...
That's why I watched this in an entire weekend, I think, the first time through, which is probably maybe why I didn't retain as much. Why I needed to watch it a second time.
I said to you, just watch one episode and then tell me if you feel like keep going. Like, you're like, I watched the whole thing.
Yeah, I was like, I'll watch one. And then we met the next week, and I had watched the whole thing.
It's the Pringles of TV shows. You can't watch just one. But but
this is the smaller can.
I mean, seriously, the thing that I think is so far great about this is it's holding up so well in rewatching it. And now that I know what I know, I'm appreciating all the things that I was just too busy trying to grasp it the first time, where I'm like, what is the story here? And so you lose a lot of those details and the narrative storytelling and all the little things that are being put into place. And now rewatching it, it's still enjoyable because I know what's happening. And now okay, that statement actually means this. Oh, this scene has a much different view now that I know what's going to follow it. So it's all these things that I think that's when I say something is well written, if you could revisit it, that's what so far is telling me the writing's at least halfway through dynamite. Because I'm just completely invested. It's as good as I remember it. And the thing that you were complaining about as far as the catching up, I feel like even in these two episodes, that has been lesser, as opposed to the one where, like you said, Lily's explaining, oh, Sergei went off and he killed himself. And it's like, okay. Whereas in this, they're kind of discovering things, but there's also new information with the stuff we already know. Yes, we know he burned to death. Yes, we know it's fake, but now Jamie sees that the digital effect is there. So we're getting some progression, whereas in the other one, it was basically just her recounting what happened, and that's a little bit less exciting. So it's holding up really, really well. So I'm thrilled about it.
Yeah, and I enjoyed these two episodes a lot more than last week's. I think the second episode, I have a real problem with that because there's like a lot of catching up in the second episode. The first episode, we said, obviously, that hooked me to watch all the rest of the 8. But really enjoyed these episodes. Like you said, there's a little backtracking, but a lot of like new stuff in there too. And now the characters are more developed. So like Jamie and Lily's relationship is a little bit more defined. He even, by the way, we didn't mention it, but this might be really random, but at one point he like cleans his house. He cleans his apartment. This is Jamie now. He cleans his apartment, and it's significant because it's like he's doing the bachelor thing where like you clean your apartment when you start dating someone and you're like, wait, if Lily, and he doesn't say this, but he's like, wait, if Lily's going to randomly show up, I should really like clean this place and like, clean the bathroom and have it be nice so that when she comes over, it's nice. And that whole scene, he like cleans everything up, gets everything nice. He's clearly late for work or whatever. And he walks out of the apartment, slams the door, and sure enough, something falls down. And just because Garland is never random, just like having the time now, by the way, to rewatch these episodes and really taking the time to watch, there's all these other things that I'm like picking out. And I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean like your best laid plans could just go awry? Like, isn't that what Forrest is kind of hinting at? Like, we could clean the apartment, we could keep everything in order, but there's randomness.
Well, also that Jamie thinks that this is, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know how this is going to go, and it doesn't. But also that scene is probably the only one so far that feels the most like stuff I've seen before, where he's about to leave and he looks around and he's like, oh, screw it. And then they play like this upbeat song where he's got his shirt off and he's like, da, 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 and he's like sweeping things off and he's like centering the bowl on the table. And then when he shuts the door, the music cuts and it's like a comedy beat where the thing falls down. I'm like, that is the most conventional thing I've seen in this entire series so far. And it's maybe 30 seconds long. The rest of this is unlike anything. That's the only part where I'm like, okay, I've seen a version of that before.
But see, rest, I feel like that goes back to the when he's playing Dark Souls and he's like, he's playing a popular level if you've played Dark Souls 2, and he's like literally running through the level, and the famous thing that happens in those Souls games is you have the you died thing, but he was like shocked. He was kind of surprised, and I was like, dude, I just watched you run through that level. Like, that's why you can't run through those levels. The game's like, you got to go step by step. So like, once again, there was an outcome that he was like shocked by. So I just feel like that's Alex Garland kind of writing in this idea that like he's not really like Jamie. It doesn't look well for Jamie. That's all I have to say. And I feel like there's been a lot of clues so far as to
it's all intentional storytelling. I mean, I don't think it's just something they threw in there for comedic effect. It's definitely that. It was just it was probably the only thing where I said to myself, okay, I've seen a version of this scene before. Whereas everything else, even the stuff that I don't think is necessarily, like the catching up, it's still all the visuals and the music are so good you don't really care. And I'm not even complaining about this scene. It's just the only one so far where I was like, okay, I've seen this type of thing before. Out of all this, how many hours in? We're 4 hours in, and 30 seconds is something I've seen somebody do before. And that's outstanding. It's great.
And it kind of reminds me of like in Ex Machina, where there's like the dance scene, the random dance scene where he starts dancing with one of his, I guess, if you haven't seen it, watch it, but he's dancing with one of the women that's at his compound, the crazy CEO. And there's just like this dance scene where they just decide to dance, and you're just like, okay, that's random. And yeah, it feels very much like a kind of conventional, like, oh, now everybody's dancing.
It could also be, now that I think about it, it could also be a way to make you think that the show's going to end, this episode's going to end happier, because you have this kind of comedy scene and it's making you think, oh, wait, maybe this one's going to end okay. Maybe the cops will show up and somebody will believe them. So it's almost, maybe it's supposed to be an emotional setup where you're like, oh, okay, there's been all this misery and all these things are going wrong, and it just seems like there's no way to outsmart them, and hey, they're going to be okay. These kids
or
are
the
gonna
relationship is reforming again, like they're falling back in love. Like it's
and
growing
it seems
again.
to be. I mean, that's what's happening. They are connecting again, so it does seem that way. But yeah, it's again, this is not a complaint, because maybe that was it. And if it was, it will work the first time where you're like, da da da, there's an energy song and he's got his shirt off, oh, beefcake, great, okay, everything's good. And then it's like, oh no, the cops are not here. And he even says, all right, they're here. Like, he sounds happy when the cops show up. And it, like you said, the camera is behind the wall. So until a certain line, I think, where they say turn around, and then we see them, and then we know, oh no, this is not what they thought it was going to be. So
and
again,
was
another
Forrest
great
watching
episode.
And was Forrest watching that? Was Forrest watching Lily get arrested or committed earlier in the episode when we saw
It is interesting
Green?
to think about who watched what, how far ahead. And I mean, we'll get into that as the episodes are coming. But at this point, because we don't really know, it does make you wonder who knows what, how far ahead, and how certain they are. Because the other thing to remember is, without the many worlds, the projections aren't totally correct. There's variance. So even if they saw this, what version did they see? We don't really know that they saw exactly what happened. And is that why he still has to kind of warn Kenton about, hey, you're not going to do anything, right? Because maybe he did see a variance where Kenton lost his temper and killed her. We really don't know. And that's what's great, is you just have to sit there, and we still don't know because we don't see everything that happens. But like I said, halfway through, the series is every bit as good as I remember it.
Yeah,
That's really what I was hoping for.
I'm enjoying it more the second time. I actually am. I enjoyed it the first time, but I'm really, like you said, I'm really seeing how well it was written. And like you said, great shows and great writing will hold up the second time because you'll kind of see like, oh no, they didn't cheat. You know, the butler did it and the butler was there the whole time. I just happened to, not notice them. And so I think it's all there. All the clues are there. All the information was really blatantly played out, like I said. But the first time I think it was like fire hose, like reading, learning or drinking from a fire hose. It was just so much information, and I'm being assaulted also by the visuals and the music in a good way. But
and I think that's all the intention is for the first time for you really to just be lost for a long and just get these little segments. But even on the rewatch, as we've talked about, there's still this room for interpretation. There is still room for you to consider, and that really, it's not going to necessarily have a big impact on how the story resolves. Those gaps don't really matter for how the story ends. What they do make interesting and worth thinking about is the morality, the intention, the complicity, who knew what, what does knowing something or not knowing something do as far as your responsibility and your accountability for it? All that is where the meat of the mystery is still there. We don't have, and we will never get some of those answers. And that I think that does make you have to consider, well, as we get further and we know kind of Forrest's backstory and the rest of it, it's like, well, would I do the same thing? And if I had seen this or not seen this, does that make me more or less responsible? That's all the stuff I think still stays the same.
Or would I have always seen this? Like was I always going to see this? Like that's the part where my brain starts to melt, where if it's deterministic, if it's inevitable, then it was inevitable that I built this machine and would be able to see into the future, which would then alter my past and my future.
That's
some
why
of
it
the
still
time
holds up.
in some of the verses, right? In some of the universes. Yeah.
Well, I think it also, it's one of those things that makes you go and look at what determinism is and what the many worlds theories are. Because I remember many worlds theory, I sort of knew what it was when I went to the show. And then I really looked it up and I'm like, oh, okay, this is where literally every possible decision has been made. And what does that do to you if you believe in it? The idea that there's a version of you that exists in thousands of variations that made, you made a left here, you made a right there. The time you made the left that time, you used a blinker the first time, but you didn't use it the second time. You still made the left, but you made the left differently. Oh, you ran into somebody and ran them over the first time, but not the second time because you did use the blinker, but then you didn't use the blinker and then you hit somebody else on the other corner. It's like, whoa.
It just feels like when you kill an NPC in a game that you weren't supposed to or whatever, and they don't have a mechanism to bring the character back or, release your sins or whatever like that. I'm always just like, oh man, I killed like the most important NPC.
Or you phase through the floor and you're just kind of stuck there and you're like, well, what am I going to do? I'm in the floor. Or when you look in one of those mirrors that reflects a mirror and you just sit there and go, well, where does it end? Well, it never ends. It's like contemplating
I can't even do
pie.
that. I can't look in the mirror later now. I'm going to be like,
I was going to say, don't go between two mirrors unless you're prepared to see a lot. The many worlds theory is a hall of mirrors. So, but that's like I said, so far it holds up so well. And I actually, like you, I think I'm enjoying it, watching it more now because I'm looking at the totality of it. I'm looking at all the way, not only what the story is and considering the little things I missed the first time, but just how it's put together, the use of sound, the use of visuals. It's just so well made. It's just great.
Well, the future now. The future.
I know some of it.
So you're now looking at the past from the perspective of knowing what's going to happen.
A version of the past, but which version and how much different is it? I don't know. It's impossible to tell. That's the beauty of the show.
My brain's bleeding.
Yeah, that's it. You're just going to sit there and go, oh, because it's the gaps in what we don't know that you can spend the most time on. Almost the concrete information is the least interesting stuff in some of these when I think back on some of these episodes. So
absolutely.
I think that brings us to a close for this pairing.
I need a break.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to watch it like this with a little bit of space.
Yeah.
So I'll remind everybody that you can pick up Music for Billionaires right now, wherever you get music. Electric Rodeo Revival. I got the order right? It's Electric Rodeo Revival, correct? Will be out in the fall. And you can listen to The Process, which is currently in season 6. And Doug, once again, I'm having such a blast with the show. I can't wait for the next pairing. So,
because it just gets deeper and deeper. So the next episodes, I feel like, are just going to be like philosophical rants, probably, or discussions. So I'm excited.
Take a break. Go watch a Stallone or a Schwarzenegger film. Go watch
Dead
Commando.
Heat. Go watch Dead Heat. Yeah, Dead Heat or
Dead
Commando.
Heat. Go watch something that doesn't
I love how
require
we went
anything.
I love how we went to either Commando or Dead Heat. We went like Schwarzenegger 80s. Do it. That'll
just turn it off for a bit. Don't think too hard, because sometimes you just want to see a guy with a rocket launcher blow up a mall or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. There's no interpretation. There's no risk of somebody coming back from the dead or you traveling in the future. It's just a big oiled muscle man running rampant.
You won't have to look it up on Wikipedia to figure out what's going on. You're like, Schwarzenegger's punching people.
Nobody's theorem, nobody's interpretation. It's just a guy just destroying everything that's in his path and spouting one-liners. Go do yourself. It's our version of an intermission. Go take an Arnold intermission. That's what you need after this show. And on that note, thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you again when we do the next 2 episodes. See you then.